We're ready to get going. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 1. We are almost done with the book. We've got about 6 more verses after this one, and we will be done with Ecclesiastes. Now, when you are a young person, as a general rule, you're convinced you're going to live forever. And so if the speed limit's 50, you go 80. You eat whatever in the world you want to eat. You've never heard of the word calorie. You've never heard of the word fat. You've never heard of the word cholesterol. You're willing to jump from here to there or do whatever it is because when you're young, you're convinced you're going to live forever. And then you get a little bit older, and then once you're older, anytime you go to the ground, before you go, you have to have a plan of how you're going to get back up. Have y'all ever been that way? You know, you drop something on the ground, is it worth getting it? You know, for a long time, anytime you dropped a penny, oh, you just pick up a penny. You know, good luck, bad luck, it doesn't matter. Then after a while, you're like, well, a penny, is that worth all that effort to go all the way down there? As Solomon, or the preacher, is nearing the very end of the book, what he's doing is he is going to give us a snapshot of what the end looks like. And wow, it's a lot more graphic than I want. And it's a lot more graphic than our English translations tell us. The English translations, our Bibles, are a little bit softer than the Hebrew. But what did they say? Growing old is not for sissies? You ever heard that? Yeah, growing old is not for sissies. And that's what Solomon is telling us here. And he is bringing us to the point of where next week, Lord willing, when we finish it, we'll talk about the whole duty of man and how you need to be faithful to God. What he's getting into this week is if you're faithful in your 20s and 30s and 40s, it is a whole lot more faithful, or a whole lot more easy to be faithful at the end. Yes, there are deathbed confessions. Yes, there are those who come to the Lord right at the end of life. But man, it's hard because a lot of times opportunities don't arise the way we want them to. So let's go ahead and we'll look at this. Read the first 2 verses here. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you'll find it after many days. Give it serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil may be there upon the earth. All right, I've always enjoyed the don't cast your bread upon the waters. When I was young, I was weird, and maybe I've grown out of that, maybe. But my daughter-in-law over here telling me I'm not. But I used to watch, back when you only had 3 channels, I used to watch a televangelist named Robert Tilton. He was out of Dallas. And he was one of those guys that would speak in tongues. And I think I even sent him $2, and he sent me a prayer napkin. And, me and my buddies, we had fun with our prayer napkins. But he went to jail and then got out, went back to jail. He had some issues. But that was how he opened up every lesson when he got to the send me money part. Cast your bread upon the waters and it will come back manyfold. And, it's one of those things where he'd say, give me money and, I'll pray for you and your life will be great. What Solomon's saying here, not connected to Robert Tilton at all. What he's looking at is your life in verse 1 and 2, the happiness of your life depends more on what you give than what you get. And that's what he's saying here. It is better to give than to receive. Now, you talk to kids at Christmas and they're like, no, right? I want all the presents. But it's better to give than to receive. First reason is because it's more fun watching the joy in other people, because the joy you have when you receive a gift, it's there and then it's gone. Second reason is when you have plenty and you give away, you have just made many friends who can help you whenever you have a need as well. And so a strong principle of life is to cast your bread upon the waters. A strong principle of life is it is better to give than to receive. So if you have opportunity to bless someone, take that opportunity. If you have an opportunity to make someone else's day, even if it seems inconvenient to you, take advantage of every opportunity you have to bless somebody, because it makes a world better and it makes you better as well. That Matthew 25, 14 through 30 talks about the importance of working with our talents and giving, and that's an important thing for us to do. All right, now look at verse 3 and 4. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south and the north, in the place where the tree falls, it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. All right. This is true of me in mowing. All right. My lawn theory is different than most people's. My lawn theory is I mow just enough to where the neighbors won't talk. And see, I don't have neighbors. But what happens is I get up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I need to mow. Oh, wait. It says it's going to rain here in an hour. I'll just wait till tomorrow. And I get up the next day, I need to mow. The grass is wet because it just rained. I need to wait a little while. And it goes on until eventually I have a little weenie dog. And the weenie dog will go out to go to the restroom, and I can't find a weenie dog. Because it's doing this thing, hopping through the fields. The grass isn't really that bad, but I'm just kind of giving you an illustration of how these things happen. A lot of things in life work that way. You're a teenager. Well, I'm going to be baptized. I'm going to become a New Testament Christian, but not today. I'm going to wait. Then you go off to college, and when you're at college, you're so busy, so you're not in church that much, so you don't ever think about obeying the gospel. And then you get married and you think, well, yeah, I go to church, but I've never gotten around to doing it. And it goes on until eventually you reach the end of life and realize you've never done what you need to do. Satan is always going to put a reason in front of you of why you shouldn't obey. The devil's always going to find an occasion of, hey, you need to do this, but let's put it off. When you're a young person, you don't think that, hey, I need to save for retirement. That's 40 years away. And then when you're in your late 50s, early 60s, you realize, I should have been saving a lot more. And so what he's saying here is, don't be the person who's always reading the skies. Don't be the person who's always waiting. If there's something that needs to be done in your life, do it today. You're not promised tomorrow. If you need to do something right, especially with God, take advantage of that opportunity right now, because then he'll bless you where there's more good things that you can do. And there's more good things that can go along. Now look at verse 5. You do not know the way of the wind or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child. So you do not know the works of God who makes everything. Now you probably hear reflections of that in the Sermon on the Mount, or more so even in John 3, right? The Spirit blows where it wills. You do not know where it's come from. You do not know where it's going. Right? John 3, 5, and 6. The greatest danger, and this happens even more so to young guys, the greatest danger is you know everything. All right? Now, what was Mark Twain's quote about that? Anybody remember Mark Twain's quote? And I should remember it better, but I don't know if I'm going to recite it just the way it should be. Those who know the most have the most to learn. Yeah, it was a lot like that. It was something akin to, I didn't really know what I needed to know until I quit asking Dad, or something like that. Give me a second and it'll pop in my head and I'll be able to tell you what it was. But God works his time his way. And you may not know why God has placed this in your life. You may not know why you're doing the things that you're doing, but God is working in his way. Don't assume that you're in charge of your life. Don't assume that you know everything. All right, and talking about focus, look at verse 6. In the morning sow your seed, in the evening don't withhold your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or both alike will be good. All right, diversification. Is that good? Yes. What you got, Doc?
It was something to the effect that the older I get, the smarter my dad becomes.
Yes, the older I get, the smarter my dad becomes. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty close to what it was. Yeah. All right. This verse 6 here, don't focus on only one thing. If you put all your eggs in one basket, what can happen? You might drop the basket, right? If you participate in many different things, maybe they'll all go well, but at least one will. And so he's talking about in life, be sure that you recognize how all these different things go. Now look at verse 7. Truly the light is sweet and is pleasant for eyes to behold the sun. If a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. All that's coming is vanity. All right, here we go back into our darkness, and we're about to get really dark. He says you go through life, we focus and we remember the good old days, right? You remember the good old days? You remember how wonderful things used to always be. The danger is we forget how difficult times really are. A lot of times people remember the good old days, and I'll say, what about air conditioning, right? Those good old days weren't very air conditioned. We talk about the good old days, and we forget about some of the racial things that were going on at the time. We tend to minimize the bad parts, and we remember the good parts. We go through and remember, man, when I was in school, it was so much fun. We did this for recess. Life was good and all this stuff. And we don't remember that mean old teacher, right? And we don't remember all the hard homework. As we go through life, you remember the good, you don't remember the bad. And he says, I want you to recognize all of life is vanity. There's always good, but there's also always bad. Now look at verse 9. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you for the days in your youth. Walk in the ways of the heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these God will bring you into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are fleeting, or our translations would say they are short-lived. So enjoy your life. God has given you, if you're still a young person, your body, your ability, your joys, for a reason. He wants you to enjoy. He wants you. He put a lake there. Well, Roosevelt kind of put that lake there, but there's a lake there. And fishing is good. It's a good thing. He put the turkeys and the deer in the field. Hunting is a good thing. He put the mall in the city. The shopping is a good thing, all right? Enjoy the blessings God has given you. But recognize that life is not always going to be the way life is. There's going to be a day where it's hard to go fishing and hunting. It's going to be a day where it's hard to go shopping, or hard day to do whatever it is you want to do. So while you can do it, you need to do it. While you can travel, you need to travel. While you have these blessings, you need to take advantage of these blessings. But the caveat, judgment's going to come one day, and you're going to have to answer for the way you lived. Judgment will come. And yes, you should enjoy life, but recognize you need to enjoy life within the parameters that God has given you, between the parameters of what He has brought here. All right, here we go. We're in chapter 12, verse 1. This is one of my least favorite parts of Scripture because, it's not what I look forward to. Yes, Debbie?
I think it can be summed up as the word procrastination pretty much sums up.
Yes, procrastination is one of the biggest things, the biggest theories or themes of that part. Yeah, you're a young person, and think of all the things you could be doing right now, and enjoy those things. Don't put stuff off till later. Enjoy those things when they're there, right? Enjoy. Yeah, absolutely. All right, chapter 12, verse 1. Here we go. Ready? Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near where you say, I have no pleasure in them. There's coming a day when life gets harder. And it's coming. It's coming someday. I have lived in, 3 different houses that have a staircase. And every time I move in, I think, that is so cool. We could put the kids upstairs, put the kids downstairs. We put this upstairs, that there's, or whatever. And after you live in a house with the staircase, after about a year or two, what happens? I'm not going up those stairs, right? because, you know, as you get older, it's a little bit more of a decision to go up and down those stairs. Now, that's just an illustration of a house. You've got to realize when you're making plans, and maybe that's about your house. Well, you got to realize when you're making plans, perhaps it's about your occupation. You need to do things now because there's a possibility later it's going to be hard to find pleasure. And so the context there of these evil days is not really talking about what Satan does. It's talking about how physically life is not as pleasant when you get older. And as we age, as the arthritis kicks in, as I used to hear a guy say, arthritis, and you know, and it gets harder to grip things and harder to walk and harder to move or whatever else it may be. I thought she was coming. Where are you headed, Marcy? She's not hurting anything. She heard there's lunch after this. That's what it is. And so you go through this and you see these different things as they happen. Now, here we go with our description of old age, okay? Let me read verses 2 through 7. While the sun and all the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain, in a day when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim. And the doors are shut in the street, and the sound of grinding is low when one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of music are brought low. So also they are afraid of the height. And the terrors in a way, the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden, the desire fails, for man goes to his eternal home, and his mourners go out to the street. Okay, now you hear that as a young person, and you're like, okay, because you're not really paying attention to what he says. You listen to this as an older person, and you're like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Find no pleasure in them. It's difficult to find the sweetness of life. Verse 2, darkened and clouds return. Earlier in life, it's easier to do things. The darkness comes as we live along long enough to have fewer friends, and we find fewer opportunities. As I said before, sometimes I'm weird. Preaching lots of funerals, I noticed that some funerals, you got a packed house. And in some funerals, you're doing a graveside service, and you're like the only person there. And I started to kind of study it and figure it out. What do you do to have a lot of people at your funeral? Die young. If you die young enough, you'll have a lot of people there. And you never age. You're always pretty. Yeah, yeah. All right. Yes, sir, Bob. Where's your, what verse? It's talking about your teeth. Your teeth. Yeah. We're about to get there. The windows get dark. That means your eyesight goes. The birds are low. You can't hear. The windows are dark. Your teeth, you can't eat as much. Or it's a little bit harder to eat. This is the before dentures, more or less. There's all sorts of terrible things happening to the body here in a little bit. And some of them, oh my, goodness. All right. You make decisions about what to talk about and what not. And we're going to observe the Passover, so we're just passing over that. All right. So, yeah, that's what the grinder's talking about, the teeth. It's a little bit harder to eat. And so you can't enjoy a good steak the way that you could when you were a younger man. It's a little bit harder to enjoy a good steak. Okay. So we're talking about these clouds. You have fewer friends at your funeral. There are some people who outlive their entire family, and maybe even they're in a nursing home, and it seems like the church forgot them because nobody ever visits, and they pass away, and nobody knows who brother so-and-so was because they outlived everybody. Yeah, and most of their friends have passed away. And so a lot of times that will happen. And it's interesting when you study funerals or look at funerals to see how that's the case. And what I decided was the younger you are, if you taught like in a school or taught in a college or if you're a politician, then sometimes you have more people come. Yeah?
My mom lived to be 99. She had 9 children, all of them still alive when she passed away, but she told us all that she was the last leaf on her family tree.
Last leaf on her family tree because she lived to 99.
She had no one else her age.
Right, right. And there's a lot of times where we get that understanding, you know, if you live that long. And so that's a little bit of what he's talking about as you go through there. All right. Descriptions of an older person, verse 3 through 7. The keepers of the house tremble. Do any of y'all, now you don't have to raise your hand because you may not be able to. Now, have you ever seen an older person? They're sitting there and their hands are shaking or their feet shake. Somebody on TV made a lot of money because they made up a disease called restless leg syndrome. And a lot of people take medicine for that nowadays. And that didn't exist, 15, 20 years ago. But you get older. The keepers of the house, they start to shake a little bit. And it's hard to keep moving around. All right, the strong men. What happens when you get older? You start to bow down. You can't really stand like you did when you were a younger man. Posture starts happening. Okay? The grinders are broken. You got loose teeth. It's more difficult to eat things. All right? That can happen. Looking through the windows, it gets dim. It's like somebody put tint on the car windows. Those cataracts, the macular degeneration, it's harder to see. Okay? The doors in the street shut. Okay? Your hearing fails, and what do you tend to do? You tend to repeat things, right? You ever go visit somebody or talk to somebody, and they tell you the same story over and over and over, to where you can almost repeat the story back to them. And you repeat the story back to them, and they say, where'd you hear that? That tends to happen as you go grinding low. Their appetite disappears. They don't eat as much. All right? When you're young and you're not in the army, you can sleep till 11 or 12 or 1 in the morning, right? Nowadays, you go to McDonald's, you go to Four Pigs, you go to these other places at 5:30 in the morning, and you see a lot of what there? A lot of trucks, because there's a lot of men who are woke up at 5 or 6 in the morning, and their wives are like, leave, right? And so they're all eating. That's one thing I learned when I first moved here was the social groups. You have your folks who are at Four Pigs. You have your folks who are at Hardee's. You have your folks at different restaurants. And those are the social classes of Marshall County. And a lot of times you can notice that as you go around. Okay? They don't sleep well. The daughters of music brought low. Turn that music down, right? Okay? They're afraid of heights, afraid of terrors, anxiety increases, they're getting nervous about a lot of things. The almond tree blossoms, all right? Those white blossoms, you notice some folks who get gray hair, all right? Desire fails, the romantic feelings, romantic actions fade. Silver and gold, the preciousness of life which is there, they begin to disappear. And the pitcher and the wheel, the useful things that are in life, they tend to break. You're not able to do the things you used to love to do. Maybe that's gardening. Maybe it's yard work. Maybe it's fishing. It gets more and more difficult to get out there. Like I said, it is not an enjoyable thing to read as you go through here. The dust returns, the spirit returns. You run through your Bibles. You see where we're made from dust, and we're going to go back to dust. We see where God has planted the Spirit within us, and where the Spirit will disappear. And so, vanity of vanity, the preacher says, all is vanity. The last time that will be mentioned in the books, mentioned 11 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. And what does vanity mean? Something which looks great, but really is meaningless. Something which we think was so important, and suddenly we realize at the end, man, I wasted a lot of time on that. And I wish I wouldn't have gone there. And so Solomon, as he's bringing this book to a close, is saying, I want to give you a picture of what it's going to be like someday. And it's a picture where if you're young, you think, man, that's never happening to me. And you're middle-aged or you're older, you're like, oh my goodness. Solomon is saying, Don't throw things away. Don't waste your time. Get things right with God, because with your body, with your physical body, if you live long enough, you're going to get, hate to say the words, I'll spell it, OLD. All right? Scary stuff. And it's going to happen. And when it happens, it's going to be a lot harder to do the things you love. When it happens, it's going to be a lot harder to be the person that you desire to be. So today, when you have your health, today, when you have opportunity, cast your bread upon the waters, be a blessing to other people, take advantage of the opportunity that God has laid before you.